Let's give it another minute before we start.
Okay.
All right, everybody, it just started recording.
I'm testing. Okay, excellent. So I can hear through my phone now.
Okay.
Good deal.
It would happen that way.
Oh, I can hear perfectly. Okay, great. Is there feedback?
Yes.
Just a little, yeah. Can everyone drop their name and organization in the chat?
So let's try it like this. Good deal. Okay, excellent. Yes, thank you, Renee.
Let's go ahead and get started.
Okay, looks like everybody, we've got a good group here. So first of all, I'm Mary Moore. I'm the grants manager here at TCCN. So I'm sure by now we've either met or you've at least received an email from me. I've been here since the end of February. So I just want to say thank you for making the time to join this today, particularly the CHW grantees. Today, we'll be talking about crisis de-escalation and in-home safety tips and protocols. Dr. Alicia Ellis will be here to present for us. Dr. Ellis and I actually used to work together in a past life. So I have had the honor of being in this presentation before, and it is very, very good. Dr. Ellis is a licensed professional counselor and mental health service provider in Nashville, Tennessee. She holds a Doctor of Education in Counselor Education and Supervision from Argosy University in Nashville, and a Master of Science in Psychology and in Professional Counseling from Lipscomb. She has more than 19 years of experience in social services and mental health. She currently serves the community in private practice. She's also the clinical director of a local trauma-informed nonprofit agency, and she most recently founded Itavia's House of Care, a supported living agency serving the intellectual and developmental disability population. Her private practice focuses on providing healing and hope in the areas of sex therapy, trauma processing, marital, premarital couples counseling, and general mental health. In addition, Dr. Alicia serves as a gatekeeper to the profession by providing supervision to up-and-coming counseling students and postgraduate professionals seeking the LPC MHSP license. So welcome, Dr. Ellis. Thank you for joining us, and I will turn the presentation over to you now.
Thank you, Mary. It is truly a pleasure to be here with you all this morning and to share probably one of my most favored topics and presentations on crisis de-escalation. And as we go along, I will share with you several examples from experience I've had in the field in doing, let me see what I'm doing. After I finish with the technical taboos. Did it pop up? No? There it is. Okay, thank you. So a lot of my early history or experience it started in home as case management. And then later I served as a mobile crisis response counselor. So seeing people in the field in their homes, in various places within the community, when they weren't feeling their best. And so I love to integrate some of that experience and also elicit from you your ideas and thoughts about home safety tips and de-escalation as it relates to your job. And so I'll be calling on you to share in this presentation with me. All right. So our overall goal is to increase your awareness and safety when responding to challenging behaviors in the safest and most effective ways. And so we're going to, again, look at this with several examples that will hopefully be easy to recall, as I'm sure you will also have your own safety protocols that you should carry with you in the field. And we'll talk about other tips that you should have and prepare for on the front end of this. So we're going to review some of the reasons for even conducting home visits or meeting persons within the community. I will probably say client because I'm so used to referring to um, um, our service recipients as clients. And so know that if you use consumer or persons served, I am referring to the same. We're going to review some home safety guidelines, and then we're going to get into the verbal de-escalation. So when starting this presentation, I want you to think through the lens of an integrated experience. And that's the concept that the behaviors and attitudes of staff members, clients, persons we are serving, our behaviors have an impact on those same attitudes. So it's an integrated experience. We're going to meet them, and they come with all of their history, all of their experiences, and everything that has occurred in their life from the moment they woke up that day. We're going to be greeted with that. They're going to be greeted with the same, all of everything we bring. And if we focus on our approach and how we show up, we can change a situation before it even happens, just by our presence, just by being aware and conscious of a few things when going in. I also like to quote Dr. Maya Angelou, who stated one of her most favorite memories or lessons was being taught that people will forget the things you do. They may even forget the things you say, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And think about it. When you've served people, when they've been in need, it could be in passing. But when you encounter people, if you greet them with a smile, that can change the whole course of their day. You know, think about it. I can remember being in Walmart not long ago. Well, it was before the pandemic, but just in Walmart, and a young lady was walking by, and I noticed she was just speaking to everyone. Hi, hi, you know, and I said, hello, how are you? And she was so floored that I actually responded to her. And she was like, oh my goodness, you've just made my day. I have spoken to, and she gave me a number over 20, stating that no one had spoken to her or even smiled at her. And that's all she needed in that moment. And so just remember how you present, how you show up, how you answer the phone can all be a part of your de-escalation efforts before anything ever gets escalated. So we're going to look at this presentation through the lens of the integrated experience. Oops. All right. So why do we do home and community contact? I want to hear from you. Anybody, chime in. why are we serving people in the home or in the community?
We, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
To build relationship and to actually see what their needs are, to hear what their needs are, but they become close to you when you care enough to go to them. And many of them can't get out, wouldn't know where to go, but by you actually saying, I'm here to help you and to walk with you through this journey, that makes a relationship. And that's what we're trying to do, is build relationship.
Absolutely. It is a great rapport building tool. And by you meeting your clients where they are in their own environment, think of how much more information you're going to get for your assessments. You get to actually see behind the scenes of what they're telling you. Very good. Who else?
Just like you were just saying, Alicia, I think it exposes opportunities where we can dive deeper and
Yes,
exploring other opportunities to help someone. It's nothing better than to kind of seeing where their needs are at, because we're right there inside of their homes, to not only build that relationship, but again, expose us to other things they may not have even asked for assistance, that we can help guide them along the way.
absolutely. Absolutely. And was somebody else getting ready to say something?
Oh, I was about to agree. My name is Daryl from the Wellness and Stress Clinic. Um, when we go into the home, that's where that person lives at. That's where that person is at for the most of their life, and that's where they feel safe.
That's right.
And we can. That's the whole point of us de-escalating, for them to feel safe, to not feel judged. When you go into an unfamiliar territory, sometimes it's hard and you don't feel safe, and you might withhold information and you might start to have anxiety. But when you're at home in the comfort of your own home,
Yes.
you're safe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you reduce, right, the power differential a bit, right? They are safe. They are comfortable in their own homes. And you coming to them, it does send that message that, or it can send that message that you care enough to um, really decrease the barriers that may even limit them from even getting to you, whether it's the schedule conflicts, limited transportation, childcare. But I think safety, you'll hear me say that throughout this, safety is first. And that's, where your clients will probably feel most comfortable. Now, while it is important that the clients or that the persons you're serving feel safe, you've talked about them feeling heard and understood, being in their own dwelling. Of course, that's going to happen. The more comfortable they feel, it's also important that you feel safe. And so that's why we're going to go over the safety guidelines and look at some presenting issues and concerns that might interfere with your level of safety. And so before I even get into this, again, let's talk about some things that might pop up or happen that would decrease your sense of safety. What are some of those things that could happen?
First of all, for me, not knowing who I'm going to be seeing. I don't know the family situation, who's going to be in the home with them. Do I have anything to fear? What kind of people might be visiting? That maybe my client is fine, but who is it that's going to be around me? So knowing my surroundings, the people who are going to be there, would help me to be more secure.
Absolutely. You always want to prepare first by familiarizing yourself as much as possible with the client, their culture, and their environment. And I will share with you when I was doing in home, I would take that face sheet and go through prior notes or any information that I had about the client. And I would even do a drive through, before the day of the actual scheduled visit. That increased my sense of safety. I now am familiar with the background case. I've learned something about their culture, typically through the case notes or supervisor, you know, and by driving through the area, because I'm geographically challenged, and when I first moved to Nashville, oh my goodness, I would get lost all the time, which is when I implemented, okay, I don't want to be late because if I'm late, that's going to impact me. I'm going to feel rushed. I might feel a little unnerved. And remember, it's an integrated experience. If I'm feeling rushed or discombobulated when I greet the client, that can impact their sense of comfort with me. So I want to do as much as possible on the front end. And so that drive by through the neighborhood, and I would try to go around the time that I would actually have a visit or the scheduled visit. And so I could kind of get a feel for what was happening in the surrounding, in the neighborhood, and go from there. What's something else that you might encounter? So we have other people. You always want to inquire about who's living in the home, who frequents the home often. When you're scheduling the visit, one of the things I would ask is, will you have privacy? Will you be alone? Will there be others? Because that might impact how we meet or where we meet. Will we meet inside the house? Will we meet out on the porch? And so you want to get as much information on the front end. What are some other things we might have to consider?
One thing would be, does the client feel safe in that environment at home?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a very good point, Daryl. Thank you. And so, one of the things we've encountered with in-home visits is sometimes there's a history of violence and or domestic violence that the client has incurred in the home, which creates an unsafe um, dwelling for them. Or maybe it's violence within the community around them, and they don't necessarily feel as safe. And so these are some things that you want to be aware of as well. So you also want to think in terms of um, things that might be unsafe. Is where the door is located, where the home is. This an apartment building? Is it a standalone um, home? Are there trees or bushes in the way that would prevent you from being able to have a clear view of the door or of
Dog.
you being seen? Dogs, absolutely, absolutely. So when you call to schedule that appointment, you want to ask, do you have dogs?
Yeah.
You know,
You know,
and
if you're allergic to something, and I did something stupid one time as a social worker, went into a house where a lady had 48 cats.
oh my goodness.
Yes, I had an allergy, but boy, did I have an allergy after 48 cats, and the
Right.
smelled and the urine was all over furniture. I had to sit down and I had to smile and not sneeze my head off. So you do need to know about pets. Arturo was right on that one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And don't be afraid to ask the question, you know. Don't hold back. And even if it's now, I don't know how she would have put 48 cats away, but you can, say to the person you're serving, would you mind for our visit if you could put your pet away? And I would find out the pet's name. Remember, because we're always thinking de-escalate before escalate, right?
Mhm.
And so, and I would use that pet's name. Would it be okay if you put Sasha away? That's my baby. That's my fur baby. But would that be okay? Or would you mind, if the weather permits, if we stay outside, especially if you have allergies?
Mhm.
Because the dander is going to be, in the air. It's okay to ask that question. All right. You also want to be aware of um, alcohol and or drug use, whether it is the person you're serving or people around. True story. I did a home visit for a young lady, and her fiance was back in a back room, and he never came out. I never saw him. However, I knew that the client was on and off drugs and in and out of service. And this was a time where she had been doing pretty good, and had recently reconnected with her fiance. And we had a normal visit, everything went well. I stepped out of the apartment, and a police officer grabbed me and whisked me away, and there were police everywhere where they were getting ready to raid the home. And thank goodness that day I had my badge with me, because I would often leave my badge or leave it in the car, but they would not let me leave. And they called to verify that I was who I said. And so, in part of your preparing, make sure that you have your badge and keep it visible on you. And I ended up in that ordeal for about 2 hours before they would release me. And that was due to safety, because they didn't know what was going to happen. If he was going to shoot, they were telling me all of this, preparing me to stay safe and giving me orders. But you never know what might happen when you're visiting someone's home or when you're in the community. So you want to prepare. I always say prepare for worst case scenario and hope for the best. So you just, and it wasn't the client. It was, the fiance that they were after. Okay. Some other things that you want to make sure of. Those are some things that might happen, that you might want to look for, um, or be aware of. But you also want to make sure that you have your cell phone with you, and always make sure it's charged and easily accessible. And I say that because I know I have always thrown my cell phone in my purse. Now, I wouldn't take my purse in, right, to someone's home. I, I would try to leave that in the trunk, but forget that. My phone was in my purse. Now it was in my purse in the trunk. And you may need your cell phone for numerous reasons. Maybe you want to call around for resources for a person, or if something does occur, you want to be able to contact your supervisor immediately, and or the police if necessary. So you want to make sure not only do you have your phone, you want to make sure it's charged. You also want to make sure that you have important phone numbers programmed in your phone. In a crisis situation, you don't want to have to stop and look for a phone number. Have those numbers already stored in your phone. We, and I'm saying we, the agency that I work with, we make sure that employees have leadership phone numbers stored in their phones for easy access. So you want to be sure to do that. You also want to make sure that You notify your supervisor when you arrive and when you're leaving. And of course, if anything happens in between, you want to be able to call and make contact. So one other thing that I don't have up here, but is important to think about, most times you probably will do your visits at home, by yourself, unaccompanied. But depending on maybe prior history, as you're familiarizing yourself with the client, maybe there's an indication that um, it can be a sketchy um, place, or maybe it would be safer to have a buddy. We've when I've experienced opportunities where I've had to take someone with me, and typically it was my supervisor or a colleague, um, but that's because I had prior information or enough experience with that client to know, oh, this person is already deteriorating in their mental health. And so I need to take someone with me to ensure safety. And so you just want to have enough information before you go out, and to know whether or not it's safe for you to go by yourself, or if you might need someone with you. So other things you might want to consider is paying attention to where you park, making sure you're not in a tow zone or that your car won't be blocked in. I am one who, if possible, will not park in a person's driveway. Um, and that's probably, you're inviting an opportunity to get blocked in. So I try to find a place on the street as close to the house as possible. Or if it's an apartment dwelling, you want to make sure you're as close to the building that you're going to be in as possible. Some of the recommendations are, when you arrive to the person's door, you want to knock on the door loudly, but not aggressively. You don't want to startle them. You want to state your name, and let them know who you are and where you're from. I can't tell you how many home visits I've completed, and the client or consumer had been visited by so many providers within the home, they have a tendency to forget who's who. So it's important to say, I'm Dr. Alicia Ellis. I'm with ALS Counseling and Consulting, and I'm here today to invite you to participate in our program, and per our conversation over the phone, or whatever your verbiage is. But just a brief spiel to remind them of who you are, even though you may have spoken with them on the phone the day before. I know some of the clients I've had, they've had as many as 3 or 4 providers coming in and out of their home for various services. And initially, it is hard to keep track. So you always want to identify yourself and then ask permission to enter their home, to sit down, and be mindful of where you sit. You know, for safety purposes, who knows the best place to sit or stand in the home, if at all possible?
By the door.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You want to make sure that you are closest to the door as possible. Should anything happen, you have an easy escape, right? And also look for other exits, right? You're always thinking safety. So as soon as you enter the home, look around and identify another exit in the event you can't get out of the door that you entered. And then you also, again, just want to check and verify if there are others in the home. Anything else you want to add before I move on?
One thing to add up, maybe I missed this before, but standing away from the door after you knock on the door. I
Absolutely.
find that very important because you can appear to be a threat yourself if you're standing right up at the door. So when you
That's
knock,
right.
stand back, and it gives you an opportunity also to observe what you're going to walk into before you even get in there. So it's a win-win for both parties.
Absolutely. That's a great, when you knock, you should stand. It's that protective stance that you take. And it's less threatening to the person answering the door. And it's protective for you as well.
One of the things that I say to them, so they don't become alarmed, is when you're asking about the fact that if anyone else is in your home, I always say, is there anyone else that'll be at your house that possibly you would like to have involved in this conversation? Or how can I better keep your confidentiality with them in the home? I don't want to go in having them think I'm trying to find out if you have anyone there or not, because that puts them at alarm that maybe you're going to harm them. So I
That's
always
right.
make sure that they know that I'm asking, so would you like to have them in our interview? Would you like, how can I better protect your confidentiality?
Absolutely. So you're inviting an opportunity, and then you're also making sure that, again, they have privacy. Very good. And that you have safety. And that, again, the safety awareness is just being aware of the environment as you're driving or as you're approaching the home. You want to be aware of what's happening in the neighborhood, right? One of the things we would get when I was doing in home, the police department, whatever community um, we were serving, the police department would send updates, daily updates about what to be aware of. And they would even notify our agency if, there was too much happening within a community and it wasn't safe to even visit that community for the day. And that was very helpful. And so that would go to leadership, and leadership would share that information during our morning meetings, and you could adjust your schedule as needed. But you want to be mindful of those things. You want to be mindful. Um, and on the agency where I'm currently working, there's always, at one of the corners, always a lot of activity. A lot of activity on each of the corners. So you're always driving through just a lot of people. And so you always want to be mindful of what's going on, what's happening. Is there an alternate route if needed? So always think safety first. And so you've gone to the home, you've engaged your client, you've engaged your person, you've completed your assessment, you've gotten the information. Um, Maybe they weren't escalated, no incidents. You still want to debrief and document everything that occurred, and not verbatim. You just want to document, but also debrief with your supervisor. Let your supervisor know of your experience. And here's the thing about debriefing, it's good to share that information, but it's also important for you to increase your level of comfort and safety. Sometimes it can just be unnerving being there. The young lady that shared about the cats and having allergies, well, that's an experience that can be, I'm sure it was uncomfortable, not only physically, but maybe emotionally as well. And just to share the story can bring some relief and comfort. And so you want to do that as soon after as possible with your home visits. And definitely if a situation became escalated, you want to make sure you debrief because again, your safety, your comfort is important as well. And then sometimes that documentation might include a critical incident report. And that's part of your agency's protocol. So you want to make sure that you complete that per your policy. Now, let's talk about the escalated person, right? Things are going to get a little heated, for whatever reason. And so I want you to start thinking of different situations that might increase a person's anxiety or agitation, and how you might recognize that. And there are various reasons why. Remember, you're meeting the person where they are. You're meeting them within their home. And there may be a lot going on within the home or just in their lives in general. And so with that comes, a level of anxiety and maybe even some agitation based on what has happened that day prior to you getting there. So let's take a look. See my little guy there? He doesn't look too happy. He's not happy that I knocked on his door so early in the morning, even though we scheduled a 9 a.m. appointment. How do you know he's agitated? And what are some of the signs that you can see in someone when they're becoming agitated or anxious? What are some things you notice, whether it's about my little guy there or just within your experience?
Their body language.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Body
Body
language, tone of voice.
Yes, body language and tone of voice. What else? What about the body language?
Yeah, let's discuss that. Remembering that if they're sitting there, their arms are crossed and they are sometimes rocking, they are ready to go and they're
Yes.
getting very irritated. And
Yes.
some of the things to remember is that if you're the one getting irritated, simply say, I'm getting upset, so we need to start calming this down. Being able to be honest and remember that there's two sides, and the person may not be able to do that. So you watch to make sure. The eyes, the glaring of the eyes is something that I was taught early on.
Yes.
By being abused. And that's something that I have to watch. It really, stimulates and I catch that one. Several other things would be that they are in the facial expression, you can see the anger.
Yes.
And then saying, listen, I hear what you're saying. I want to help you. And if you could just, let's calm down together and just talk to me. Talk to me and I'll be glad to do what I can to help you. Sometimes they're just wanting you to hear them and respond.
Right.
And not
That's
stand
right.
and stare.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Also, lack of eye contact or gripping of phone in their hand, furniture, whatever, things like that.
Yeah. So you want to be aware of all of these signs that are there, as well as your own, right? I heard that too. So the facial expressions, the hand gestures, if their hands are crossed, that's not open and inviting. If they're gripping something or tapping their fingers. Daryl, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was agreeing.
Okay.
The eyes tell it all. The eyes tell
Yes.
it all. They're ready to go. They're looking somewhere else. If they don't make eye contact, they could be anxious or nervous about something. If they're slumped over, those are the tell-all signs.
Absolutely. And we have to be aware of those things, and begin the de-escalation process early. And friends in need, I don't know the name, but you hit it, you know, hit the nail on the head. You
I'm
want
sorry,
to,
Sarah.
Tara,
Sarah Wells.
Sarah. Yes, thank you, Sarah. You want to acknowledge, right, what you're seeing, what you're witnessing, and reassure them that you're there to help. And I love that you offered, let's take a moment. That's all de-escalation conversation. And you want to begin it as early as possible. So as soon as you begin to see some of these behaviors that you've already said, fidgeting, pacing, someone mentioned rocking, hand wringing, maybe their speech becomes rapid. Someone mentioned raised voice, excessive hand gestures, balled fists. True story. Um, I had my own personal client who um, would become anxious, and you can see his elevation. Um, Now, it would be from 0 to 100 really quickly, um, but you can see those gestures. And his was the balled fist and so tight, it would definitely leave indentations in his hand. A more recent example, I was assisting with a warm transfer to of a client who has a history of um, escalated behaviors that often turn homicidal. So I prepared the new counselor to work with this particular client because of the high risk nature of the client. Um, and I shared different ways that he would be able to see the client escalate. And I said, now, because this is a new situation, right? A stressor, meeting and being transferred to a new counselor, there was going to be increased anxiety. And so we were able to witness that. And the counselor, when we debriefed, he said, I noticed his rapid speech, the fixation on, the war and just really negative things that were happening in his community and then in the world in general. And the hand wringing. And he just became increasingly agitated. And so at one point I stepped in and just asked him to breathe, but that's because I had relationship with him. And when I stepped in and just asked him, hey, very calmly, but I used his name, I didn't say hey, let's take a moment to breathe. We've been talking a lot. This is a new situation. Let's just take a moment. And we all took a moment to breathe and we were able to move forward. But just another example, if you notice it, you can intervene. And the earlier you intervene, the less likely things will become agitated. So, possible triggering events.
See that stance?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
In looking how the standing of the first one on the left,
Yeah.
it's don't encroach on me. And when I see that says to me that we need to calm down and slow down and
Mhm.
give it a chance.
So if your person answers the door like that, what do you think may have triggered that mood or that stance?
More or less telling you I'm not sure if I should trust you or not. So you're going to have to earn my trust.
Trust, absolutely. Absolutely. What else?
Not a welcoming sign.
It's definitely not a welcoming sign at all. And maybe they woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Maybe they're worried about bills and their finances. And here you come. On top of everything else on my plate, here you come. What do you want?
And for me,
And
when I see,
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
for me, when I see this, the first thing I want to think is, okay, how can we engage differently? I don't want you thinking I'm here to pry. I want you to see, I want you to feel that you're human. I want to ask you basic questions like, how are you doing today? Isn't the weather beautiful outside? I want to make you feel human so that you don't feel like there's a power dynamic between us. I'm not here to pry. I
So
want you to feel comfortable.
good. So you want to try to begin neutralizing that stance.
Absolutely.
One
Absolutely.
of the things that we will get that stance a lot because we're here for COVID. You know, anytime they see you coming, it's COVID. Well, you're wanting me to do something that I will not do, and you're not going to talk me into it. So they are already prepared to
That's
shut
right.
you out. So it's learning, you know, that relationship as they grow to be able to trust you, that we can discuss anything, including the yays and the nays or the not at alls.
That's right. And this is a perfect example to share, and it's going to come up on one of these slides. That remember, even with this stance, even if, you know, they don't share your belief or what you're bringing to them, and they meet you with resistance, remember, please do not take it personal.
That's right.
Right? You know, and that's something I experienced, but I also share with my counselors quite often. Remember, it's not about you necessarily. And someone said something very important. A lot of times, our clients, persons we serve, they want their position, their beliefs to be heard and to be respected. And we can do that without, you don't have to ascribe to their beliefs or their position when it comes to COVID. You're there to provide a service and to provide information and um, resources. And so remember that even if they answer the door like that, or they, you know, become belligerent, which that could very well possibly be, particularly around COVID and masks and, you know, vaccines. And so that's a real quick trigger, right? The discussion that you're coming with. And so let's look, how much time do I have? Because I want to get
About
into,
12 minutes, right? We ended 11.
we ended at 11. Okay, so we can get this, guys. Um, let's look at briefly the 5 stages of verbal escalation. So,
This
um,
is Mary. I'm sorry. I dropped off of my computer dropped out. We actually have until 11:30, Alicia.
okay,
So
okay,
we can have time for questions too.
okay, good. So I won't rush as much, but I will make sure you have time. So when we talk about verbal escalation, what does that look like? Well, there are 5 stages, and you will recognize them not only by what's being said, but by all the things that you've already identified. And so the questioning, and that might start at the door. Why are you here again? A refusal to participate. You know, the release is, you know, their verbal release. It could be profanity, it could It could be, uh, they might even verbally attack you, or not necessarily you, but your authority, your position. Who do you think you are? Who gave you the right to come to my home and blah, blah, blah. They may use intimidation. And if you're still present at that point, once they escalate and have their, you think in terms of a volcano exploding, uh, that's your tension reduction. They're releasing all of what is inside, all of the anger, the frustration. After that, sometimes if you get to see that part, there's a calm, right? I've gotten it out of me. Sometimes after that, there's a willingness to cooperate. Not always, but sometimes. And so with the questioning, there are two levels of questioning, and one is for information seeking. And they just want to know the information. Now, they may ask in a harsh way, but if it is an information seeking question, regardless of how they ask it, you want to, professionally answer it, remembering not to make it personal, right? It's not about you. And the other type of questioning are the challenging questions, or more irrational questions, and that's where they're questioning your authority and they're becoming more and more intimidated. You want to steer clear from engaging in that. You can allow them to, right? That's probably that release, moving into intimidation section. Right here, I'm going to say implement your safety protocol. At this point, if you're in somebody's home and it gets to this point, I believe it may have been Sarah gave a great example of, you can try to use the de-escalation conversation at that point. Maybe we can take a moment to pause here. If that does not work, it would be best to leave, because remember, you're in that person's home, you're in their environment. And it can be really unsafe for you to stay in that environment with an escalated person and hope that you can get them to de-escalate. You'll know fairly quickly if your de-escalation conversation is working for them. So what does that look like? And again, remember that it is an integrative experience. You want to make sure you remain calm. Manage your response, again, by not taking it personal. Set limits. You can handle challenging questions. And these things can prevent a physical confrontation. And hopefully, you can, even before you get to that point, de-escalate. And sometimes the de-escalation, again, is leaving. That's okay. You have to follow your safety protocol. You have to remain safe. You can always reschedule. And it might sound like this might not be the best day to continue this. May I call you in a few days to reschedule? If you can get that far. Sometimes they may tell you to leave.
And sometimes, I found that if you simply say, I see you're getting upset and I care about you.
Mhm.
Using those words of care around them is, I see that you're getting upset. I don't want that. I care about you. How can I help you? I'm here because I care and I don't want to do anything that would bring harm. learning again, to be able to be completely honest without being crude, always saying please and thank you, and know that I'm in your home at your request because you allowed me in and I want to be here to help you. It's
Absolutely.
giving them the fact that this is still your place and you're one in charge. And I'm here to help you. A lot of times I've had them just to calm right down as soon as they say, I care about you and I really do want to help you. I hear you. A lot of times they get angry with you because they think you're not hearing them. So just simply
That's
say,
right.
I hear what you're saying, and then repeat. Now, is this what you are meaning? And then I repeat it. Now, what can I do to help you with it?
Absolutely.
And that's been the greatest help that I've had.
And so what you're talking about is empathic listening or reflective listening, and get and here it is here. Focus on the person's feelings, not just the facts, right? You want to acknowledge or attune to that person. See what they're feeling. Look beyond the behavior. Attachment theory tells us every person wants to be seen, heard, valued, accepted, and understood. And typically, when you see these behaviors or see these escalations, particularly when a person is engaging with an agency or any provider, they have a history before you. And not always has that been a positive experience. So you want to provide a different experience to engage them. And that begins with reflective or empathic listening. You want to try to understand where the person is coming from, right? Take the time to listen to them. Identify what you're seeing. I can see that you're upset. And I'd like to know a little more about that. See, that can be disarming. And the verbiage that Sarah offered, that can be disarming. Be non-judgmental. And then restate to clarify, all right? Reflective. Reflect back what they said to you. And that might look like, I hear that COVID has been a scary experience for you and your family. And, whatever it is they're sharing, reflect that back to them. Because then they know you are actually listening. And at the end, you can add a clarifier. Am I hearing you correctly? Or is that correct? And tell me more about that. Taking a moment to just listen can make all the difference in the world in that session. Any other comments?
Yeah, so like to me that's like the first step to let them know, hey, I'm listening to you. Now I'm challenged to say, how do I show that to you? How do I show that I'm listening to you? How do I jump into your reality and show you that I'm trying to understand you? Even if I don't understand, I'm trying to understand you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, um, and so that you don't feel judged. And you said allow silence. Like silence is good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Silence is good.
Give them a moment to gather their thoughts. Some people are internal processors and they just need a moment to think about what it is they want to share with you. Or the silence could be, oh, wait a minute, this is different. This person is actually listening to me, right? Because that can be unnerving because it's not as familiar for some. Yeah, the silence can just be a time to gather myself internally, calm the nervous system. Don't be afraid of the silence, and then the restatements, the clarifying message, and tell me more. Daryl, you mentioned, how can I show that I'm listening? You can use your nonverbals, right? Your minimal encouragers, your head nod. You can lean in just a little bit. You don't want to lean in too far. You don't want to invade their space. But you want to lean in just enough to say, I'm here and I'm listening. You can do the, I see. Just minimal encouragers to let them know I'm here with you. Okay. So I added this, at the last minute, and I meant to go back in. But these are some of the things that you've already stated. Uh-oh. Okay. That you've already stated. Oh, shoot. So that I want to help you. Please tell me more so I better understand how to help you. And then sometimes you'll have persons that you're serving. It maybe you need to assist them in making a call or helping them schedule appointments. You might want to take that extra step. That could be another way of showing, hey, I really am on your side. You want to be sure to use their name. We've already talked about recognizing the signs of escalation. You want to reflect their feelings. We talked about using minimal encouragers, reiterate the ways in which you can help. You have your resources ready. Before I go there, have your resources ready. A great thing to do when you're going into the community is have a resource book, a binder, and put all of your resources in that binder. Phone numbers, community resources. If you don't have that, that would be a great thing to do, a great tool to have so that you can easily provide a resource if necessary. Okay. I put this in there. I use this when I do my in-person presentation as a way to show that this is not what we're talking about when we're talking de-escalation. This works in some places, and I've been trained a couple of times on takedowns and, for certain facilities. However, we don't mean anything physical in de-escalating a verbal escalation. So I always throw that in there just to be clear. That is not what we mean. Nothing physical. You don't want to touch or invade your person's space. You want to respect their space. You want to maintain self-control. And I keep emphasizing this because I have seen workers in home providers become escalated themselves, right? Because they've been triggered, right? We're human too. We have had experiences, um, several experiences with COVID, or things happening in the world. And so we have to make sure we maintain our self-control, taking care of ourselves so that we can do the work that we signed up to do. And I mention that because I've seen that go awry. And so make sure that you do what you need to do for you. Take care of yourself, manage your feelings, talk to your supervisor beforehand. This may be a little triggering for me. And I'll just use a quick example. Talking about COVID in particular, for me, because I had a very serious battle with COVID, which took almost a year to recover from, and where I couldn't even speak. And so you hear some raspiness the more I go on. Part of that is an after effect. And so if I were to go out and talk to people about COVID, at some point, it may become triggering to me, and it might impact my ability to do my work. So what I would need to do is make sure I've taken care of myself, make sure that I've processed with my supervisor, hey, this is a trigger point for me. What should I do? Should I become upset or tearful or just anxious at this point? Know that it's okay for you to take a time out and take care of yourself, but definitely have that conversation on the front end. De-escalation is so much about preparation. The more you do on the front end, the easier it is to handle when you're in the thick of it. Okay? Be mindful of your physical presence. We've kind of talked about that just a little bit, but you want to maintain appropriate distance. Remember, at the door, but also inside, and always take the supportive stance. And if I were in person, I would show that to you. It's really, you're kind of positioned where you have an easy escape should someone come charging at you. You can kind of easily get away by having your body shifted to the side just a little, not so that you're not welcoming, but that you're allowing space. And since we're social distancing, that's easier to do now. And then we've talked about the de-escalating conversation from early on. And those are just, it's the way in which you converse with your person, remaining calm and centered and self-assured, right? It's an integrative experience. If we're anxious, our clients, the persons we're serving, they can feel that. And if they're anxious, we can feed off one another. And I've witnessed that too. I've received feedback from clients wanting to know if they're, and this was not even in counseling, but in case management, wanting to know if their case manager was okay, because the case manager was more anxious than they were. And so they were checking in. Is it okay to be served by this person? And so you always want to make sure you take care of yourself. Don't become defensive. Remember, it's not directed at you. It's not about you. And maybe they directed at you. However, it's not about you. And talk to your supervisor afterwards. Always have your resources and be respectful. Even when you're setting limits, like what are the limits you can set when you're in someone else's home? Remember, we have to respect that. This is their home. It's not our office. What are some of those limits? Or how can we set a limit and be respectful? Any examples?
A limit could be possibly how much profanity is used.
Okay. And how would you ask your person to limit their profanity?
I would simply say, with all respect, that type of language, I would rather you refrain from that. So if you can please respect my wishes, I would really appreciate that.
Okay.
Or empower them to use different words that are not so colorful.
Okay. And what if they refuse that and become escalated because now you're in my home and you're going to tell me how to talk?
I think letting them know that you understand their frustration and you're going to do the best you can to help them find out where the lack of communication is, whether it be like they forgot you were coming or you arrived late.
Yeah. Yeah. So trying to be understanding. And I asked you that question because some will tell you right off the bat, I curse a lot, but I'm going to try and keep it together. I'm going to try and hold my tongue, or, you know, I'll try not to make it so colorful. But some will absolutely, because they are at home, they may not care about your preferences and how they speak. And so if that should happen, you have to decide, right? Is that a limit that I need to push? And what could be the consequences of me pushing that limit? And so just be mindful of that and be prepared for either or. Absolutely, you can ask the question, but just be prepared, right, for either way. For some persons, they will absolutely try not to use as much profanity. Others, that could escalate them because you're in my home.
I think one thing is that we need to not be so sensitive when we're trying to
That's
help.
very personal. Mhm.
And when we become and we build a relationship, then they tend to stop, being so crude.
Mhm.
I've had my veterans, I've worked with veterans for years, so I've learned that you choose your battles.
Yeah,
That's just one that I would go with. I let them say what they wanted to say. Number one, it's
yeah,
a shock system usually to you. They want to see how much they can shock you, and are you still going to care for me afterwards? So it's an act
yeah,
of testing me. So I just let them go right ahead, and
yeah,
do what they need to do, period.
yeah, yeah. That's absolutely right. Because,
But I'm
uh-oh,
sorry.
go ahead.
Well, I think there is also a difference between someone just using profanity as the way of talking versus them using profanity to curse you out. I think
Yeah,
there's a major difference there. So that's what I was referring to, because there's a line of disrespect there, and maybe you're not the right person to be able to have a rapport with them, to be able to develop a relationship where they're not using profanity at you directly. So there is a line there for me personally. There's a
oh,
line there.
absolutely.
And when they cross that line to a certain point, now I see as it's nothing personal. I just may not be the right person to really get through to this person the way in which I'm trying to. Maybe there's someone else better suited than myself in that situation.
So at that point, Sabrina, when it is directed towards you, and it's not just general, I'm sorry, it's not just general conversation that they're using colorful language. At that point, what you're describing is the escalated, right? The escalated um, verbal crisis. At that point, absolutely, you set a boundary, you set a firm line, and at that point, we're going to implement protocol. We're going to go ahead, and this might not be the time for us to finish this. And I would say at that point, then that's your exit, right? You set that firm limit. The limit is, the boundary is, I'm going to go ahead and leave now. And maybe I'll give you a call back in a few days, or we can reschedule. And at that time, you absolutely have the conversation with your supervisor. It might not be a good fit. I just had this scenario to occur where there was a younger um, counselor, an older client, and male client, and he did not respect um, her professional ability and had stated because she was too young and no woman was going to tell him. And so that's really about fit in addition to safety for, both. And so it became a matter of, she did exactly what she was supposed to do. She went ahead and left. She did not engage in that conversation. She informed the client that someone would be in communication regarding upcoming appointments. She did not say, I'm not going to meet with you or, she just did not give any further information so that the situation would not escalate further. So absolutely, if it gets to a point of escalation, you implement your safety protocol. And that is, you know, you go ahead and leave if the escalating conversation um, is not helping.
And it's a respect thing. So I'm going to respect that client enough to make that decision on if that's what they want to use.
Mhm.
But the way I would might redirect it is if they're referring to a person, I'm gonna ask what's the person's name, and then I will
Okay.
state the person's name when a sentence comes, and
Okay.
hopefully it will engage the client to maybe say that person's name. So just redirecting it, and if they don't, then I respect the decision for them not to.
Mhm. And so again, I want to point out that we're talking about two different scenarios. So one is, this is how this person engages in conversation. They use a lot of profanity, and they so I've encountered um, several clients who refer to people as bitchs, right? And that's just their general conversation. They don't mean anything derogatory, but that's what they say. And so, Daryl, I hear that might be an opportunity when you can say, um, well, what's her name? And then start referring to her by name. In the instance that Sabrina, if I'm understanding correctly, this person is escalated to the point, right? Remember the questioning, the intimidation, right? The stages of verbal escalation. This person is probably at the point of intimidation, probably one step away where there could be a physical confrontation. And that physical confrontation could be slamming something, throwing something, if not bodily contact. And so you do want to make sure safety first. Remove yourself from the premises. At that point, you want to limit, right, engagement, verbal engagement, and keep it simple. Let's reschedule, or, someone to give you a call in a couple of days to possibly reschedule, or maybe, it's just not a good fit. And so those are great examples, great examples. And so when we're talking about the de-escalation communication, we've talked about body language, but who's seen this before? It's called the 55-38-7 rule, where they say word choice, and this is, I'll put his name down there, but I can't see it right now. Research shows that 93%, approximately 93% of communication is nonverbal. Well, what they mean when they say that is that the interpretation of what is said comes from the body language, which makes up 55%, the tone you're using, but only 7% from the word choice, the words that you use. So I could say to you, I could say, I have enjoyed our time together. Or I can say, I've enjoyed this time or our time together. Hope to see you again soon. Which are you more likely to believe? And I'm sorry I can't inflect it anymore at this point, but which are you most likely to believe? Do you believe that I really enjoyed our time together in the first example, or the second?
For me, it's the first one because you have more enthusiasm in
Yeah,
that, especially if it's genuine.
yeah,
That can be, and it can be felt with your smile and then with your voice. So it would be the first one.
absolutely. What might you infer from the second example?
That you're saying it because you had to say it.
because I had to say it and that I probably didn't enjoy it, right? And so we would just want to be mindful. And I wanted to put that there um, just so you can remember, you know, body language, tone, words, smile, you know, appropriately. I want to show you something. So I just told you to smile, but you also don't want to look as though, like, smile when they're discussing something that is frustrating to them. You don't want to smile through that. That can be taken as an offense. You want to be sure not to touch. These are all things that could increase escalation. You know, some people have a habit of, it's a form of comforting, and you might want to place your hand on someone if they're sharing something that's tough or challenging for them. But please be mindful of not touching in that way because it can be triggering. It can be seen as a threat, or it can trigger some trauma, right? Because you don't have permission to touch. You want to keep your hands out of your pockets, um, just because it could be a sign that you might be concealing something. It could be intimidating. Um, you don't want to argue or try to convince them to listen to you. If they've made a point and at this point they're angry and agitated and they don't want to hear anything else you say, respect that. You know, don't point your fingers, point or shake your finger, and give them choices. Empower them with that, right? We can do this today, or we can reschedule, or we can, whatever choices that you can actually carry out, give them that. Again, we're meeting them. We want to be helpful. We want to build that rapport. And so again, we don't want to yell over their voice just because they're escalating. You want to remain calm, and you want to keep your tone, keep your volume, and eventually, if they're someone who can be fairly easily to de-escalate, they will begin to match you because they see that you're not joining them up here. And it really does work. I would use this approach when I was teaching graduate courses, and you walk into the classroom and everyone's talking and it's loud, and my presence didn't bring them down initially, then I would just begin class and I would begin talking. And this pretty much is my volume when I'm talking anywhere. But I wouldn't raise my voice to try and speak over them. You want to be mindful of the same. Your calm presence, remember, integrative experience, your calm presence can bring them down and respond selectively, right? That's what we were talking about. You might not want to respond to everything. These are just more examples that we have kind of already gone over. You want to make sure that you trust your instincts. Again, you'll know quickly if your de-escalating conversation is working. Again, you're using empathic listening. You're going to reflect back to them what you've heard them say. Clarify to make sure that you're understanding clearly. And join them. Let them know that you see them. If your de-escalation is not working, in office, even if, in office, I would tell the counselors, keep water or something packaged that you can offer. Sometimes, it would be coffee. Hey, let's go walk and get coffee. That might not be possible in the home setting, but maybe you can say, hey, would you like to pause and grab something to drink, and then we can reconvene? But if it's not working, stop and go ahead and reschedule if it's possible. If not, don't engage in further conversation if it becomes to the point where you need police assistance, don't hesitate. If it's becoming violent, uh, safety first, and then contact your supervisor. And I've experienced situations where that has had to occur. Several situations in case management. And so know your safety protocol. I believe you're going to be given, if you've not already had the safety protocol, know it, make notes on it, keep your numbers stored.
Alicia, this is Mary. I just wanted to give you a 5-minute warning.
This is it. And then we're going to do some questions. Thank you. And so then just going over again, your do's and don'ts, right? Recognizing the warning signs. And remember, I didn't put this on here, but we covered it in the beginning. Remember that your preparation is a form of de-escalation, right? All those things that you do ahead of time, finding out about that person, the culture, the area, their environment, right by beforehand, making sure you have your phone and it's charged, that your car is operating properly. Another thing, make sure you have a second set of keys somewhere close by. True story. I locked my keys in the car in one of the higher violent neighborhoods in Nashville. Um, and it was late fall, around 5 o'clock, and I was not prepared. And it was really unnerving. And it's funny, but the client had her, I don't know, it was a male that was within the home, and they, kind of broke into my car for me to get my keys. But you don't want to put yourself in situations like that. And that was me as a, new into the field case manager, visiting homes, not prepared. And so you want to listen, remain calm, be objective, right?
One
Be
thing
aware.
I
Go ahead.
did, my keys were in my purse. I locked my purse in the car.
Yeah.
And then when I got inside, I looked around. I didn't have my keys, but then my second set of keys were in the trunk. So I didn't have anything.
Oh, goodness.
But one of that is considered the drug lord of that neighborhood actually came out and got it out for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I had a friend for life. Still
That's
do.
right.
Although
That's
he's in
right.
prison.
But that happens. And you know what? It's all about how you approach, right? It's about your presence. It's an integrative experience. And that can transition from the person you're working with to the people that surround them. So you always want to be aware, be mindful going into the situations. Uh, any questions? Again, you don't want to power struggle. It's not about that. You don't want to invade their space. Don't make light of their situation or their feelings. If they have a feeling that opposes what you feel or believe, just hear them out, right? And don't make light of or laugh at or dismiss what they're feeling. And don't make false promises, right? Don't promise a service or a connection or a resource that you cannot get for them or, that you can't fulfill. And always remember safety first. Your safety matters, right? So when you're pulling up, if it doesn't feel safe, leave. Call your supervisor, let them know. Hey, and this happens, has happened in my experience quite a bit. Hey, there's a whole gang of people on the porch drinking, playing shooting dice, dancing. I don't think this is a good time for me to visit this client. I'm going to call and reschedule. And that's just what I would do. Or Maybe there was DV in the home and the perpetrator was back in the home. And that wasn't a safe situation to be in the home. That may be a time where I might say, hey, how about we meet down the street at the McDonald's or an office or whatever the options are, the library, because they have little private rooms. So thinking safety first, and what are your options? And know that you have a right to think about your safety as well. Sometimes we are so client focused that we forget about ourselves. And your agency wants you to know that you matter and that your safety counts. Now, I know we went over a little bit. Any questions? No? Well, there are no questions. Oh, there's a question. Kelly? I saw a raised hand.
Sorry, I meant to do the chat instead and just say thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate your engagement throughout. Thank you.
Thank you. You are
Thank you.
excellent.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here. I am so grateful for the work that you all are doing and will do. Remember to stay safe, and do take care of yourselves.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ellis, and thank you for everyone on the line. There was so much good participation and
Yes.
sharing of experiences and best practices, and I really appreciate how open everyone was in participating.
Absolutely.
So
Take
we
care.
will, this has been recorded, so we'll make this available to everyone as well. And if you have any follow-up questions for Dr. Ellis, I'm sure you can send those to me and I'll forward them on to her.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate your participation.